Hello, Illia Polosukhin. Welcome to Ground Level AI Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's really good to talk to you. You're based in SF, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And, famously, you are one of the co-authors of the seminal paper, Attention is All You Need. You're the co-founder of Near Protocol. Before we get into anything else, I do want to set the stage about the Attention is All You Need paper. Can you talk a little bit about, did you realize at the time that this paper about the Transformers architecture was going to change the world really and underpin every generative AI model today? Was that something you thought about back then?
I mean, not in these terms. I think kind of at the time for me, right, we were seeing a pretty rapid progression of the deep learning models, especially in language and images and kind of in other modalities. And there was a lot of architectures that were kind of trying to target this, like, how do we understand and manage longer contexts? And so to me, it was clear that something, they're going to be a breakthrough and that like we are kind of very close. And that's actually why I left Google to start Near AI, because like, okay, we have now the building blocks. Now it's time to teach machines to code. But it wasn't clear that this specific architecture will be the kind of final stage. And then we just need scale, right? That wasn't clear at the time.
So the scale of it was not quite clear then to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the scale is all you need in a way.
Right.
That wasn't clear to some extent. I think like people were still looking for what other kind of improvements we need to bring. And I mean, realistically, there's obviously a lot of tweaks and improvements that, if we're talking about like modern, like, this year models, there's a lot of additional components there to make it work, to make it scale to like large context, etc. But yeah, the core idea is it's very simple. There's like not much you can remove at this point. And it seems to work and scale really well, especially with the modern hardware. And now hardware is being optimized for this architecture. So you kind of have like both sides working toward it.
Do you keep in touch with these guys? Do you have like a group chat or anything?
Yes, we do.
Okay. How is it active group chat?
Not super active, but we meet, like some of us meet from time to time, depending on kind of who's in town and in what places that we are. Yeah.
So as you said, you kind of you were the first one to like hit the road from Google Brain and start your own thing, Near Protocol. And from the beginning, ever since then, you've been really focused on democratic technology, privacy, ownership of data, and how that could relate to AI ultimately. Can you talk about why that was your focus when you left?
I think part of it is coming just like maybe being from, post-Soviet Union, privacy and kind of sovereignty is something that you grew up, fighting for, and you definitely don't want, a government that can effectively dictate what you should think and how you should do things, right? That probably like kind of some of the core values are coming from that. But I think it's just practically speaking, this is technology that is now the interface, right? This is how we perceive information, how we interact. And this is even before LLMs, right? If you actually think like Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed, it's all in TikTok, right? It's all machine learning. Like it's all an AI model. And the goal of that AI model is not to make you smarter, to make you a better person. It's to make more money for the company, right? That's the incentive, and that incentive drives kind of all kind of disruptive behavior underneath. And so I think as we moving toward AI being even more the way we consume information, the way we write, the way we communicate, the way we do actions, the way we do business, like that becomes even more critical that is aligned with you as individual, not making more money for some specific company. And so that's kind of where like, the blockchain and decentralization is like it's like a solution to actually achieve that in principle, because obviously you need a lot of resources, you need a lot of kind of compute, you need all of those pieces. And so the only way so far has been, okay, we're going to build a company, we're going to amass all those resources, and then we need to pay back all the investors by effectively building models that can extract money from the users, right? That's kind of like the default progression. Doesn't matter where you start, right? You start with a nonprofit foundation, public benefits corporation, like you ended up in kind of the same place. And so blockchain actually offers an alternative which says like, hey, this is an open ecosystem, everybody joins and contributes, and there is an economic engine underneath, but it's not an extractive engine. Like there is no actual like, hey, we need to return something, etc. It actually all works on the kind of contribution model. And so in a way, this actually like addresses the exact model that OpenAI, for example, started with as a nonprofit foundation. It's actually the model that that can achieve that.
But you certainly have, I assume, friends at Anthropic, at researchers at OpenAI, at Google. What do they think of what you've built? I'm curious.
I mean, there's a lot of people in those labs that are very pro open source. And it's really, again, right now, it's like this kind of, because you need the resources, a compute to do research, right? To kind of, those labs are effectively your options. And until I would say kind of decentralized open ecosystem is able to match that, it's like philosophically interesting, but not always practical. And so kind of for us, the big part was building this kind of engine so that more and more people like, okay, yes, I need private AI. Where do I go? I go here. And that actually like, okay, now there needs to be more compute on the network. More compute means, when there is some slack, you can start using it for other research tasks. So you're kind of creating this flywheel underneath.
Is there a way to kind of at a high level explain what near protocol and near AI is in that regard, as far as payments, as far as accessing the compute? Can you give that in a way that doesn't go too in the weeds, but helps us understand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a vertically integrated stack that includes everything from kind of decentralized like payment settlement infrastructure, right? So you can actually like, we can pay each other and not require a bank or a some processor to be between us, to kind of encrypted AI, right? So like nobody can see what you're using AI for. And so all of these pieces work together, right? Like if you want to use encrypted AI, you need a money to pay that doesn't go through anyone, because otherwise they can like block you from actually accessing it, right? Stripe can just tomorrow say, sorry guys, you should not access this. So you kind of need all these pieces to work together in one stack. And at the end, it's still an AI product. You can access it. We have a agentic harness as well that's focused on security to access it, but you can plug it into any other existing solution. Yeah, think of it as like kind of full stack, both economic engine and kind of AI engine working together. Like the way I usually frame it is AI is the front end, like it's the kind of what you're interacting with, and blockchain is the back end, right? That's like what moves the things around, moves the value, provides trust, coordination, verifiability.
So I was in SF a couple of weeks ago at an event called Open Frontier, where it was talking, leaders were talking about the importance of open source AI, open weights, that it was even a national security risk not to have stronger US open AI. Just going back to what you said about your upbringing in Ukraine, I mean, do you think that, especially today, there seems to be this just sort of like dichotomy that, you're either for safety and you're for closed models, or you're for open source and obviously not that concerned about safety or security, I guess. But what do you think is missing there?
Yeah, so that's why we usually frame it as user-owned AI instead of open or closed. Because
Okay.
at the end, open or closed, that's kind of a technical implementation.
Okay.
Versus what I'm as a user actually looking for.
Right. So the idea is that people use open models because they want to keep control of their data. They want to have privacy and security.
Yeah, but also like you want to know which model you're using right now.
Right,
If you're hitting an endpoint, like even if you're using open weight model, but you're hitting an endpoint by some provider, you actually have no idea what you're using. It's like they can be providing you whatever they want. They can be rewriting prompts. They can be so like even if you use open weight, but it's not on your laptop, like you actually can be like don't know what's happening.
Like, so you mean like if there is a router, but it's
any provider right now.
Any provider, they could say that they're routing between different models, but you don't actually know what's happening.
Correct. Yeah. And so like what we saw, I mean, among other things, we're addressing that as well. Like we actually give you an exact like like effective signature that attestation that this model was used, this system prompt was used, this hardware was used, and it was end-to-end encrypted, right? So there's a lot of kind of pieces there, and that's why again, user ownership here is like really principled from like I want to be in control, right? I want to know what happens. I don't want anyone to be in between me and the computing because again, like you can do a very subtle system prompt rewrite, like to effectively affect how people are thinking about things or how they make decisions. And imagine this is like in the business context, you can like start, changing how company makes decisions because you just like change how the information is presented by like rewriting a little bit of a system prompt. And so it's really important to have this, like, I mean, if we're talking about both companies and personal, this verifiability on top of privacy. But I think like for the models themselves, we do need to go further because if I'm, company or user or countries now as well, I actually care what goes into the model, right? Like, yes, there's, some US model open weights, there's Chinese model open weight, but at the end, there's only like few providers who actually publish the actual training data that went in.
Right.
And without knowing the training data, like, there can be a lot of bias in this. There can be sleeper agents, which is like a special way to train a model so that it activates specific behavior only under certain conditions. Like it only activates, in September 2026, it's going to start doing something. There's a way to train a model like that.
I've not heard of that. These are called sleeper agents.
Yes, there's a paper on sleeper agents. Yeah,
okay.
So we don't know, but like this would be a way to especially when people use this for coding agents a lot. This would be a way to effectively inject malicious code into code bases, right? So you want to know the training data and the process of training. So again, you need verifiability. Because like even if somebody says here's model weights and here's data, you have no idea if this is actually true, right? So you need the process itself to be verifiable. So that's really what we're building is like this verifiability at the core, and that's part of privacy. Because the other thing is you don't actually always want the open weights. You like if I'm training my own, fine-tuning my own model that I want to offer to other people, I have some private data I don't want to release to anybody, right? It's medical data. Maybe they want, new cancers, like scoring system. Well, I still want to give a verifiable answer to the user, but I don't want them to be able to access and like extract weight. So this is where we get into safety. Like the user ownership doesn't always mean it needs to be open weights. It just means it needs to be verifiable. There's a path. There's a signature that this hospital trained this model or whatever the kind of verifiability path you're okay with. So like Anthropic can participate in the system and say, hey, we've trained it in this way. We're not going to show you like the exact things, but at least this is how it got there. Again, right now, everybody publishes results, benchmarks. We have no idea if this is true, right? Like you can publish, so you need to rerun it and then, they can switch things behind the scenes, etc. So like that's kind of really addressing that whole spectrum of, and that's why I'm saying like closed source versus open source. To be clear, open weights and open source is very important. And I think we need the open source, right? The data, the training mechanisms. But there's cases where you do need closed source models, and you can still have verifiability and privacy with those as well.
So I've written a bit about verification processes, but What I've written about, I think, is really more about the outputs, like how do you verify the outputs? But what you're talking about is really verifying the inputs. Is that right?
So it's verifying both, right? Inputs and outputs. So
Okay.
you effectively, so the way we do this, right, in very kind of simple terms, is we use both cryptography and hardware. And so the modern hardware has this confidential computing mode, which effectively locks in inside a computer a like a Swiss vault in which you can kind of authorize that specific code will run on specific inputs, and this is outputs, right? So you kind of get that verification, and you do need a lot of like cryptography around that to actually like pass it through, run it on different devices, etc. But this gives you kind of the ability to know that this model, right, this Hugging Face, model, and my prompt or my system prompt or my training data, and the outcome is this, right? So this is the produced outcome, and it was run on this hardware, on this specific GPUs, on this specific CPUs, and so you get like full kind of authentication of that.
So everything you've just said is rather a contrarian view of sorts. The more common sentiment that you read about in the media today is from Anthropic and OpenAI. We need to, keep the model weights and the data and everything under lock and key. We need to win the race with China. We need to think about how to regulate use of these models. So Demis Hassabis from Google DeepMind just yesterday or the day before posted an essay about that, about a potential standards body. When this comes out, it'll be a couple weeks since then. But what are your thoughts on that sort of discourse that's out there right now? It's really becoming quite political too.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely political, and I think there's there's a core values that kind of all of this builds on, right? Like my core values and maybe broader kind of crypto ecosystem core values, and I hope most of the Americans and most of the world is that you want to promote kind of self-sovereignty and like ability for everyone to express themselves and do things, right? And then yes, we have already laws around unlawful behavior, right? So like designing and doing like bioweapons and bombs, etc. All of that is already preventable, right? Like somebody can go and study nuclear physics and do the same thing without AI, right? It's not like relying that like, hey, now everybody's just smarter, and because of this we should like limit who can be smart. That's the same thing as saying like, hey, some people should not go to library or like go enroll in some programs in university. So I think this is, I mean, in a way, this goes back to like, I mean, freedom of speech and all of those things. Like it's the same components. If you're limiting, like this is speech. I mean, it's literally text, right? It's speech in a very principled way. And so if you're limiting that, like instead of limiting the actions, right, instead of limiting the outcomes, like you are kind of censoring at the core of the knowledge. And the problem is like, practically speaking, like if I'm like my one of the co-authors of Attentional Need designs mRNA sequences, right?
Yes, I've spoken to him too.
Exactly. I'm not a very well versed in it. And so I wanted to learn, to have a good conversation with him. I wanted to like learn more about how it works. And I'm afraid asking this to, OpenAI or Anthropic because they're gonna ban me if this goes like sideways, right? And like not because I'm trying to design something, but because I'm trying to learn. Right. So this is where, like, again, like, I mean, I have a friend who was nuclear physicist who was asking questions about some nuclear kind of device, and it got banned actually from OpenAI. And so that's kind of the challenge is like as soon as you start censoring speech, you're effectively getting into this like we've been down this road, right? It ends up being kind of a losing game. So that's why it's political, because like it kind of misaligned with core values of, I mean, honestly, United States. And so if you build on top of this, I think there are obviously risks that these models are introducing, right? The cybersecurity being a big kind of wave, and crypto actually been hit probably harder than anything else. Like crypto has had over $1 billion stolen in the past 3 months. And effectively, you can track it as models got better, like more and more hacks happened, right?
Because hackers would be learning from the AI how to
Effectively, because
them.
more people now have access to, like before, like effectively cybersecurity worked before prior pre AI on the sense that smart people look at this code and they didn't find anything, and so we hope that other people when they look at it don't find anything. That's a principle of cybersecurity right now, right? Like effectively reviews. And now we have like, hey, everybody has access to effectively the same smart person level of tools and sometimes even more, right? Because it's like it doesn't sleep, it doesn't need to eat, it doesn't need to like switch context. It can just like like look at every line very carefully. And so now the kind of the attacks themselves are like accessible to a broader set of people. And potentially, if you're a kind of malicious actor, you can leverage that. And cybersecurity is very, as a defender, you need to close every single issue, right? You need to find everything. As an attacker, you just need to find one. But again, there's a principled solution, right? We need to formally verify, like mathematically verify the code that it does exactly what we expect, right? We need, systems to actually test this whole business intelligence. So it's like we can censor people from accessing this, and obviously right now it's like a transitional period where we have a lot of code that's kind of has issues. Before we kind of clear it all up, it creates kind of disruptive behavior. Again, it's like you cannot like stop it, right? The genie's out of the box, right? People, yes, even if you don't have access to misses, you can use like a simpler model and run it for longer and maybe orchestrate it better to find these things. So I think like again, it's about like a principled approach that we need to address the problems instead of kind of hiding in the sand.
Do you wish that Americans had more of a sense of what you experienced in Ukraine, for example, and sort of understood really what it was like to grow up with that kind of environment?
I mean, Ukraine obviously it's a very interesting land, right? As we see it now, there hasn't been more than 20 years without some kind of catastrophe happening in the past.
I guess I just mean growing up in the former Soviet Union, and that's something that Americans might take for granted that they did not have that.
I mean, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that for me, maybe pretty, like, for example, in the past 20 years, there was over like 200 banks that failed in Ukraine. Like literally just disappeared. Like a bank I was paying, utilities just doesn't exist
Wow.
anymore. Right? I don't know. So like you need to pay somewhere else, right? So like for me, and like in US, this started to happen recently, right? The like Silicon Valley Bank
Right.
and like a few others, but like that wasn't a thing for a few decades. And so like people didn't really like when we were talking from a blockchain crypto perspective, we're like, hey, look, you want to have your own control. Like this is very much a very US value. Everybody's like, yeah, but we have banks, it should be fine, right? And so I think a lot of this is, people haven't experienced this, which is, I mean, for the most of the world, right, is happening in a pretty standard way. I think the other part of this is, I mean, US frequently uses like national security as a way to kind of overrule some of the, again, core, even constitutional values. So I think that balance is always hard, and it's always easy to scare people and kind of address this. And so you post USSR is kind of where you're like, hey, look, I understand the needs, but at the same time, we also like need to understand that if you step over, like that actually creates a way more negative the outcome, right? And obviously, like communism versus kind of capitalistic system, like that's also a big difference. And I think people have like a very different understanding of, like, people are scared of communism here, but not because of like understanding of what is
Right.
effectively the markets. Then like markets is actually what drives competition and actually makes things move forward.
Right.
And so here frequently I see like, oh yeah, but we should like limit like in some way markets because it's dangerous. It's like creates inequality, does all those things. The problem is then you're falling back into effectively communism, right? And so like, I think that fight here is like, it's not always grounded in the understanding of the economics that's required. So anyway, so those are like, I mean, again,
Then how do you, I'm curious how you square what, again, I'm assuming in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, you converse with folks who believe that AI is very dangerous, that it could end all of humanity if we just leave it to its own devices. Like, how do you communicate what you're saying over there and over,
Yeah, no, I know. It's an interesting question. I've had these conversations, and it's a debate. I mean, the thing is, like, to Dennis's point of self-regulation. I mean, self-regulation is actually happening right now. Like, all of these companies are actually self-regulating pretty strictly. At the same time, we haven't really seen like anything that's like a specifically AI affected thing, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, we obviously, there's like people having psychosis and maybe leading to suicide, but we've seen this with Instagram, we've seen this with anything effectively.
You're saying we haven't had this, like, something bad has not happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can think of it as like, hey, in other places, like airplanes crash, right? And now we need to like regulate how airplanes are being manufactured and like tested, right? And airplanes is a great example because they actually are based on self-regulation first, because it's highly technical, constantly evolving technology, and then there's still kind of government oversight over that. But that on itself, like, that hasn't been the challenge, right? And so, like, right now, we don't even know what problem we're trying to solve with this, right? Like, when I do talk to people who are actually working on this in these labs, what they're trying to solve is it effectively doing something, like trying to do something on the background with, and not what you are telling, right? So like, this is, and that's why I talk about, I think alignment should be with the user, right? It does what you want, right? And it's on your side, right? That's a tractable problem. Everything else, like, hey, people should not do bad things, that's the intractable problem, right? Because even the definition of a bad thing differs between countries and, religions and everything, right? So, and like, we as people are not aligned with each other by definition. So I think like alignment with, hey, does it do what it says it did, and it's like, is it aligned with you? That's a very kind of clear, tractable problem, and there's people working on it, and it makes sense. Everything else is like, now you're just trying to censor and kind of do a brain lobotomy on this thing, and like hope that somebody will not figure out how to like reprompt it so it like works out of it.
So when you look at Europe, for example, and you hear all the talk over the past month about sovereign AI, what do you want to say to these folks? Are you wanting to say, forget about all that, let's think about an open ecosystem? Or are you thinking, well, good luck with that? I don't know.
No, I mean, I think like what we're building delivers on that, on what they want, right? Like, we are delivering, you can run nodes in your country, still join the whole network, and kind of get the sovereignty, get your own model if needed, and provide it to your citizens. And I think, there's benefits of having even like maybe not fully trained from scratch, but fine-tuned model for specific kind of cultures and design. So I think actually, we are working toward like enabling sovereign AI, but not as like Germany gets one and France gets one, but actually like, how do we have a network of kind of where everybody's still in the same, because like, it's like internet, right? Everybody should be in the same place, but you have your subdomain, .d, .it, .us, right? So like, that's kind of the idea, creating kind of a holistic open platform, and then people can have their own kind of clusters in it.
What do investors say about, so many investors have poured their money into Anthropic, into OpenAI. What do people say about what you're building? What has the response been like over the years?
Yeah, there is a group of investors who are interested in this approach, right? And so, we have kind of quite a few supporters there. It is maybe different from some, like some of them are different, some of them the same. Like Andreessen Horowitz is our investor, for example, from back in the day, and they're obviously investing in a lot of the AI. So I think a lot of investors kind of open to the idea, but then also want to make sure they capture the upside from all the
Right.
whole evolution, right? Which, I mean, that is their business model. So, but I think, yeah, this is actually where for governments and kind of and enterprises, this is what, they actually should be wanting, because it enables them to have the control to make sure they don't have kind of this liability of like a company just blocking them or disabling them. They can be participating actively, being the compute provider, hosting models, like be the not just passive but actually active participant, and still benefit from everybody else participating as well, right? Again, like there's a lot of technical, there's a lot of kind of compute, there's a lot of pieces that needed. Like if every country needs to like replicate its own Anthropic or OpenAI, right, that's a very hard problem. But if everybody poured together into kind of one open network, then you get kind of the benefits of scale.
So if you were hanging out with Demis tomorrow, what would you say to him?
They should join our network as well.
Well, so if you look back over the past 9 years, since the Attention Is All You Need paper came out, since you started Near Protocol, is there anything that has really surprised you about where we're at now? Or has it sort of unfolded in a way that is not shocking?
I mean, mostly not shocking. I think there's some interesting kind of pieces, but I mean, the coding being the main thing, like that was our premise in 2017. So that's kind of very much like it's actually slower than we expected. We actually thought we were gonna make progress in 2018, 2019, right? And it took 5 more years to get there. I think the concentration around these things is kind of expected because this technology by default is more like it gets better with more data, with more compute. So you get the
concentration of power.
Yeah, concentration of power. So I mean, again, that's why we've been trying to build the alternative kind of infrastructure for addressing that early on as well. I think my explanation was like governments right now are still more figuring out how to use AI. There is a missing thinking around what is the post AI kind of like services, government infrastructure looks like. To give you an example, again, same with coding and cybersecurity. A lot of government services kind of rely on somewhat like nobody intelligent and infinite patience will try to break the system, right?
Right.
And so now that's like pretty easy. I mean, the example I use is like you can DDoS legal system with like a valid, lawsuits, but like they can be like small in amount. Like you can effectively do a lot of kind of, or you can submit IRS, a billion-page return, which is completely valid, but it's like processing that is insane amount of resources, right? If somebody tries to do it. And so you kind of need the services to be fully AIified as well, so they can actually deal with all of those things. You need some type of like Sybil resistant, kind of some of the primitives we've been designing on blockchain side. So you need like think about it from like, okay, everybody has AGI in their pocket. Everybody can do anything that's like before effective. There's like only few people who can do something, right? And usually they, on the good side. Now it's like everybody has access to all the information, all the abilities. Like let's make sure that like that still works, right? And again, blockchain is designed like that. Blockchain assumes that whatever you do, there will be a person out there who will try to kind of attack it. And so we design with that expectation. So you kind of need to redesign a lot of systems like that. So I think to me, that's actually more surprising that this is not happening like very actively. Mm-hmm. People are still kind of figuring out like more, like we're asking like a lot of the discussion is like the wrong questions. Like that's maybe a big part for me. That's kind of surprising.
Did you ever imagine that transformers and then the idea of scale is all you need would turn into this, $1 trillion build out of AI data centers? Is that something that crossed your mind?
maybe not an exact that term. I think it got more clear like post 2022 that like, okay, this is going to be like a compute race from here. I would say like earlier on, the thought was like, if we train it in the right way, we can actually get a small model to be very intelligent. And the reality is like that's also happening, right? As this like $1 trillion runs, whatever, billions of dollars runs happen, we also get smaller models becoming smarter and smarter over time.
Right.
Like I'm actually running, locally like a 35B model, and it's like, it's like state of the art 3 years ago.
What's your setup like? What's your setup like at home? What do you have running? What do you have going on? I think I read that you had like 12 different agents running and doing this different things.
Yeah, I have a bunch of stuff. So because so we're developing our own agent harness, so using that a lot, and have like a version in the cloud and version on my computer, and I have two. I now carry two laptops, so both of them running agents in parallel as well. So, but yeah, the generally, a lot of automations, a lot of like, hey, scan news, summarize, like do like a lot of the company related, like prepare meeting notes and process it for commitments and kind of task tracking. A lot of coding as well. So I have like continuous loop that picks up issues from GitHub, builds it, reviews it, kind of cross checks it, and then kind of another parallel loop that like cleans up the code, refactors it, because like the first loop leaves a lot of messy code. So like that is like, if you just leave that thing, it's like keeps building and building and building.
Are you able to sleep? I hear that, people have to wake up in the middle of the night and check on their harness, their claw.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that did not happen, but I have very small kids, so I wake up because
they also wake you up. Okay.
I check on my agents while I'm doing
it. Some of the other guys who co-authored the Transformer paper have talked about this. But what do you think is coming next? There's been a lot of people working on, what could come after Transformers. Do you think that will happen anytime soon? And do you think, you said that, everything's optimized for Transformers now. What would it mean if something else came along?
Yeah, it's hard. Again, like the current models are actually like, they're transformers, but they also have like, local processing. There's a lot of like things that like fused into the modern architectures. So I'm assuming even if there is like more things, they're just gonna get like kind of combined into this, just because like at production scale, like you kind of just keep adding. It's hard. Like the reality of Transformer is a very simple thing, right? And so it's hard to imagine there's like something like completely different, right? It's more like, hey, how do we actually like scale that, make this easier, make this. Now, caveat is, if there's a completely different computing architecture, right? I don't know, we get like carbon-based processors, or quantum becomes at like right scale, probably will get something different, just because again, this is very much optimized for this like parallel processed matrix mode computing. So that's probably like, if there is a new computing platform that has different properties, there are probably some new ways of programming that, and that will lead to new ways. Now, I think what I'm interested in is like new ways of training this model. Right now, it's very inefficient. Right, we like throwing trillion tokens into it, 15 trillion tokens to like train a model, and obviously it has kind of superhuman understanding and intelligence, but at the same time, for example, like it knows everything about everything, which probably not the most useful way of like actually compress intelligence. So we can have an intelligence, and then now with harnesses it can go actually search and find information, because like the information it has from the internet is going to be outdated anyway.
Right.
And so there's probably ways to do that in a more effective way. And people are already doing this with like synthetic data, where it's like they're actually training on like processed data instead of the raw internet. now anyway. But I think like the optimization itself, there's ways to improve that. And again, from a hardware perspective, the current optimization is highly ineffective. So that's also just like if we think principally, right now we have this kind of compute units, right, that have memory here. We have kind of lots of them, and the kind of the gradient requires to like recompute everything back, right? Like fully move back and like recompute, and it doesn't fit, etc. There's checkpointing. There's all kinds of like machinery to make it work, and so that feels very like not principled. But we haven't found any other approach, and so far every approach that people tried, this approach beat it.
Right.
But that would be like a lot of people working on it. That would be kind of my guess as well.
So last question, just quickly, like what are you most excited about with what is happening right now, about what's coming? What are you most worried about? Both of those.
I mean, I'm excited. I think we are kind of, for all intents and purposes, right? The current models are extremely intelligent. Like they can drive the harnesses, they can do all the things. And so, there's been never a more fun time to build, right? This is exactly like when I was 14 and I was like learning about all of these things. This was exactly what I wanted, right?
Wow.
I'm like, I want to talk to a computer and computer build stuff and like move really quickly and do all those things. So
yeah.
So I'm really excited, like kind of the potential this opens up. Especially again, anyone now, anywhere, we had like massive online courses, right? That was kind of like innovation in education. Like now we have a completely different thing, right? Like you don't even need the teacher. You have a model that can,
right,
by talking to it, you can learn anything in the world, right? And so I think just like the kind of human enablement that this leads to is insane. And so really excited to see everything from science to kind of daily life. The worry is indeed that it's super easy to manipulate this. It's super easy to control it. I do very much. I was talking about this like for years, that I think government will step in to control the centralized AI providers, and we kind of been seeing that slowly happening. And again, it usually comes from national security. It's always the reason. But again, maybe that's the USSR in me. But yeah, like it always starts with like some big scary thing, and sometimes it's real. To be clear, like sometimes it's real, but it leads to kind of deterioration of rights and deterioration of free speech. So I think like maintaining that, like actually, interestingly, I think the open kind of decentralized AI is the best approach to prevent government stepping in over centralized AI. Because if decentralized AI exists, there's no point of controlling centralized AI, right? So it's actually a really good offset for like as a kind of vault. And so, but again, like you don't want to live in a world where like AOL is your internet, right? Like one company controls every single website.
Definitely not AOL for sure.
Yeah, and so like this is obviously we have right now some competition, and not like at the same time, again, if we don't know what goes into these models, like it's hard to trust them when you put them into like medical, legal, financial use cases, right? So so you really want to have kind of everything open. So, and then, again, there is a movement, everybody's pushing. I think like this has changed dramatically. Last time, when we talked to GDC, right, like over a year ago, like this wasn't on anybody's radar, right?
I know.
It's crazy. And now it's like, this is the conversation, everybody's kind of figuring it out. So I think like it dramatically changed even in past like couple months.
Yeah.
So I think it's now about really bringing this forward, making this truly kind of the way to like the default way. And then obviously still want different competing forces to really innovate around it.
Well, this is perfect. Thank you so much, Illia, for joining me. I really appreciate it. This is great.
Thank you.